Hi there, it's Polly here with Mr. Snoots. Aha! And tea, which is very important. No, I'm not dressed as Velma, I'm just enjoying wearing orange. I am in fact doing Velma as a burlesque on stage next week. But what the hell, jinkies. So, I've covered it before on this channel. I am a huge fan of the old FASA, F-A-S-A, FASA if you're left-handed. Their whole Renegade Legion properties. This started with, what have we got up there? Interceptor. The box set of Interceptor by FASA was and remains probably the best space fighter combat game ever written, because it was standout innovative. It was really popped out from the general pop, and the reason why was because it had flavors entirely of its own. In simple terms, it had a simple vector movement system, so that you weren't just doing Star Wars and flying like you're in atmosphere. You did drift and you did have to turn and burn. It had this fantastic little system for armor, where your ships had grids of armor. There was a grid 10 across by X deep, depending on the thickness of the armor. Armor came in groups of 10, so you had between 10 or 100 armor, so you could have a 10 by 10 block. Weapons, as they hit the different faces of the armor, would penetrate into that. So you'd scribble out the sections of armor that were hit, you'd randomly generate which column they went down, and there were weapons that had different templates that could carve out different shapes inside that. Some had a broad damage that would scoop, someone would penetrate in and fire outwards. So it was kind of neat carving the armor off things. It was hilarious. They had a flowchart system for damage inside the craft, so you could take a bit of a bang. So it was a good thing for flying one or maybe two or three aircraft around. You had a good tangle. And the other thing that really worked in this was that it had an excellent ship design system. They had ships provided, and they had some good source books that had excellent art in them. I loved them. They had two sides. One was the TOG, the Terran Overlord Government, which was a horrible, oppressive dictatorship that had modelled itself upon the Roman Empire, so it had lots of imperial kind of things. So its ships all have names like Spiculums and Pilums and Gladius and all this sort of stuff. And there was the mighty rebels, which was one legion that had turned rebel, and a lot of the aliens and so on were helping them. And these guys are out there trying to overthrow the Terran Overlord government. So there was a bit of fun there. And so it had a background, had a flavour. They did role-playing games in this. They did the best chariot racing game ever. Anti-gravity chariots pulled by carnivorous beasts, so you can pull up behind someone and they're chewing through the chariots. There was then Centurion, which was a ground combat system. Again, probably the best ground combat science fiction system ever done, because it had a balance of forces. You had the same design system for fighters was used to build grav tanks. Grav tanks had flicker shields on them, which the ships did as well. But if infantry are relatively close to a tank, they can essentially play lasers onto the shields and transmit the flicker rates directly to other large weapons they've got, so that these weapons can then ignore the shields on the tanks. So having infantry around you is a bad idea. Artillery was really good at getting rid of infantry and brushing them off if the infantry had come out into the open and so on. And tanks were really good at vaporizing artillery. So you had a balance of forces. If you just went in with tanks, you might start getting in trouble if the other guys got like infantry and artillery and anti-tank stuff, with the infantry able to start essentially spoofing your tanks. So you had to work with that, and because it meshed perfectly in with the space fighter rules, you could bring in your aircraft to fight them over the battle, do ground attacks. Things can fire back, used exactly the same damage and system, so you could do air-land battle. Then they added a thing called Leviathan, which was for massive city-sized ships that are used to invade systems, and that was, again, probably the best large ship battle rules I'd ever seen. The ships had a ponderous feel when they moved. They had this really ponderous kind of momentum, so they felt great. They've got clouds of fighters out there intercepting each other. Fighters are quite good at intercepting missiles and so on. So what are you going to do? You're going to keep your fighters close to try and keep the other guy's fighters off you. Are you going to sort of keep them in a more mid-ground to try and intercept incoming flights of missiles and so on and damage them? Or are you going to send them to attack the other guy? Or are you going to make specialized flights? You're going to do strike fights that are tooled up to do attack runs on the other guy, because if they're getting close, they can start peeling his systems off him and make him more vulnerable to the main ship, etc. Great set of rules. So a new company called FASA has arisen. I don't think it really has any direct ties to the old, but they have taken it over and they have relaunched the sort of the Interceptor Leviathan series. So we're going to look at Interceptor first, because I'm a big fan and I wanted to see what they'd done with it. So look, I try and find the positive in every game. I have to say I was very disappointed with this in many, many, many ways, but it has its good aspects. Let's have a look at it. So these are the rules, and it comes with a campaign supplement, which is good. We'll go over that in a bit. Mr. Snoops, would you look after that, please? Yes, he will. So, boink. Pros. So what we have here is Interceptor. The book sets up a space game. They have a range of miniatures that go with this. They have maps that go with this. It takes some ideas from some other FASA games, but So anyway, you're rolling d10s to hit. You are building up a dice pool of dice. Normally, dice need to roll a 7 or higher to hit, but they've got a rule that says 10 dice is the maximum that you can roll for any particular check. If you have to roll more than 10 dice, all you do is roll 10 dice, but the target number you need in those dice is reduced by an extra 1 for each dice over 10. So if I was rolling 11 dice, instead of having to roll 7, what I'm doing is rolling 10 dice, and I have to get a 6 or higher. Likewise, if I had 12, so I'm going to have to roll a 5 or higher, but just using the 10 dice maximum that I'm rolling at any one time. You have pilots. They are rated for their piloting skills, their gunnery skills. They've also got, what is it? They got sort of grit and toughness and these sorts of things. And you've got ships. There is a little list of ships in the back. These things have their thrust, their agility, resilience, which is a damage threshold. They've got ratings for controls and shields, and firepower at different ranges, and also if they've got any special armament like missiles, what they can take or what have you. This is a game where you are split into two forces. Your characters are given a rank, which for some reason expresses itself as an actual rank, colonel, captain, whatever. But you're rolling for experience and adding your rank to it. So in a way, rank really should be seen more as experience than, yes sir, colonel sir. But anyway, the side that gets the initiative will be moving one ship. The next side moves a ship, and you do an I go, you go until all movement is done, and then you do firing in the same order. The guy's got the initiative, fires one ship, the next guy fires another, etc. Doesn't have to be the same ships in the order they move, but whoever has the initiative fires first. If you outnumber the guy by 2 to 1 or more, you'll be moving multiple ships each time you're supposed to move a ship, just to keep it simple. We've seen this in many games. This is not new. There was another fantastic FASA game, Crimson Skies, my favourite air combat game. It used kind of a chewing through armour system that was simplified down from Interceptor, and what it did was it had a chart. Instead of having to painfully figure out turn ratios and give you a massive list of different manoeuvres and so on, what it did was it had a chart which had your ship, or your plane in this case, and it had a whole series of ending locations that you could be in, and it would give you the speed you needed to get there and what maneuver rating your vehicle would need to do it. So you would look for something that you could meet. This game does the same, but now we get into difficulties. Here is the chart. You'll see this is a digest set of rules. The only version of the chart you get is this, because you're expected to download the thing off this site. So you can't get the rules and just play the game. I can't read that. The hexes have, each one's got 7 bits of numerical and number information on them. They're tiny. So it's unreadable. Not just because I'm old, it's just unreadable. You'll also notice the text of the book is black on a dark blue. It's nigh unreadable. This thing was agony to read. Page layout people, don't do this ever. Your first job is to communicate information. If it is difficult to communicate the information due to your layout, you failed. You screwed it. You lose. You get nothing. It is a bad idea. So it was very difficult to read, and the core chart is just impenetrable. You can go in the site and get a copy of it, but like I said, the game that you bought, it doesn't come with the tools in hand that you need to play it. But it does work the same way. You look for a position that the ship's going to go to, and it'll give you the thrust and the maneuver you need to get to it. If you want to go to a position that requires more thrust or maneuver than your ship has, that's when you start getting sort of, let's get jinky with it. You can try and burn the engines hot. You have to make a roll, which comes sort of off your skill and the ship's systems. If you pass it, all is well. If you fail it, you start taking damage to the ship. Not good. If you're trying to get into an area that requires more basic maneuverability than the ship has, again, you can try and push the envelope. Again, you have to make a pilot skill roll, aided by the maneuverability of the ship, and see if you can get the extra points you need. You need 1 hit for the speed thing. You need 1 hit for each extra point of thrust that you're going to get. And if you can't get that thrust, you have to basically pick the next similar maneuver down that used less thrust. For the turn, you'll get, essentially, you need a number of hits equal to the extra maneuver points that you're getting. If you fail, then you are out of control. You start moving until you've spent as many points as you have, and then you continue going straight. However, if you do a roll that gets no hits, or if you do a particularly bad roll, then the vehicle is out of control, and you randomize its facing, and things get way more difficult because you're not allowed to fire when you're out of control. And I will give the game this: when ships get out of control and when the thing starts getting damaged, the crew starts wanting to abandon vehicles, even if a player might say, oh, it's still got 2 hit points and 1 gun's functioning. Keep on firing. No, your crews tend to bail out in this. It's very, very rigid on what it lets you do for firing. Many hex-based dogfight systems will have a cone of fire. They'll often give you like a 45-degree firing arc out the front. This one does not. You can only fire directly down the line of hexes you're looking at. It goes straight ahead, flat hex side to flat hex side. There's a little ruler that's broken into like short, medium and long distances, but there is no jiggling room. You have to line up with someone exactly. So lining up to hit someone is actually a huge challenge, and that is correct. That is actually, that's real dogfighting. There are some other little maneuvers that you can spend points on. So you can also jink one or more points to left or right, which is useful for lining up. So you can keep some points for doing those sorts of things. But in essence, it is quite hard to line up. And while you've got a pretty good pool of dice, the temptation to overpush the maneuvers is always going to be there, and if you're choosing too high a difficulty, you are going to flub it, and then you're going to end up pointed in ways that you never intended to go and make yourself vulnerable. Obviously, the moment you expose that rear arc to anybody, you are screwed. There's direct fire, which, as I said, goes straight down the line, and that is to hit with that. Your vehicle has a firepower. What you're doing is you're adding in your gunnery skill and the firepower, and you are rolling that number of dice to hit. Your opponent, he is attempting to essentially block you, and he is rolling dice, which is the shielding factor, and if he can see you, then he adds in piloting skill. There are also bonuses depending on what position you're in. If you are coming head to head, you roll one less dice. If you are coming head to head at an angle, you roll two less dice. You get bonus dice if you are on his tail. So, and you subtract the defensive hits from the offensive hits. Anything that remains, that's a dice roll you do on the damage chart. That is the D10 roll on a chart. If you roll a 10, the enemy vehicle explodes. So anytime you take damage, you've got a 1 in 10 chance of just becoming a fine phosphorescent mist. Pretty dangerous. The other effects in there will be things like you can short out weapon systems so they don't work, and the guy then has to try and repair his systems. You can damage thrust, obviously you can damage maneuvering ability, you can take out weapons. You can take out structure. There are some critical hits which do multiple damage, but once the vehicles get damaged, obviously maneuver becomes way more difficult, because as the capabilities of the craft go down, you can't fling it around the sky the way you used to, which means that your positioning becomes way more predictable. You're more likely to get shot. There is a rule that essentially you've got your thrust, and you've got your maneuver, and you've got your structure, and these different things. Damage comes off. If you've taken damage to all of these, your crew has to make a morale check to see if they bail. She's coming apart. Once every system is damaged, even if the thing's still flyable, they might go. Likewise, if a craft is out of control and fails to get back into control after it's out of control, you start doing morale tests to see if the crew stick with the ship or if they eject. So like I do like seeing the crew get in. So this is not original Interceptor. You can play with a bundle of fighters on each side, because you're not doing each fight in detail this season, without taking the detailed damage. They're not whittling away armor. Take a ship, look at its look at where it is, figure out where you want it to be. If you've got to do a roll to push the engines, or if you've got to do a roll to push the maneuverability, you do it. If you screw that up, then the rules simply tell you, how to shorten the maneuver so you end up somewhere else, or you go out of control, move on to the next guy. And now, I've got firepower this, I've got a skill of this, I'm rolling this many D10s, he's rolling a set number of D10s to block me. If I get through, he's got a 1 in 10 chance of blowing up for each point that gets through. So if I get through with 4 dice, then I'm rolling 4d10. Any one of those that gets a 10 blows the guy up. When you're rolling to attack, by the way, any 10s that you roll on the dice, you can pick up and roll again. So, yeah, it is pretty ferocious on the attack there. Not on defense. So, it's a pretty quick ending dogfighter game. Yes, aircraft do get damaged, but blowing the hell up is a pretty common result. So, it's like, that's the game. It really is the game. It is a perfectly adequate space fighter game. Those rules are clear. Those rules are crisp. They let you do a game. You can maneuver is something that maneuver chart idea is actually one of the best things anyone ever came up with for sort of air combat style games, because you don't worry about, am I doing overhand Immelman with a side slip? No, you just say, I kind of want to end up 2 hexes over but facing that way. Yeah, there we go. I'll need to have at least this much speed, this much maneuver. Great, So that is the reuse of a good tool, and that is great. The damage is, for a dogfighting game, that is fine. A 1 in 10 chance of blowing up when you hit. Yep, great. So you're going to want to fight with squadrons. You're not going to want to dogfight individual aircraft unless you're just kind of learning the game, because something can vanish on you pretty quickly. So it's a perfectly good space combat game. But it's not Interceptor. Interceptor gobsmacked us with its unique systems, the kind of the joy and hilarity of those systems. It was managed to be simple and robust, but the individual fighters who are very survivable, you worried about the damage you were getting. Things didn't just blow up and go boom. You actually saw the risks you were taking. You saw the damage you were taking. You're trying to maneuver to keep your better armoured sides facing towards people. You were bugging out if things were getting too bad. It wasn't like a we're in, we're dead, we're gone situation like this game. New Interceptor does not have ship design rules in it. You take the ships they damn well give you. So there's none of that joyous kind of tinkering around with systems either, trying to find your cool fighter. Some of the fighters we designed for Interceptor were golden. They were amazingly good fun. We had to house rule it a little bit because the rules didn't make a difference between like fixed firing weapons and turreted weapons. We put in rules to make it's much harder to hit with turreted weapons because you're having to guess windage twice. So we doubled all the windage because it's not just the aspect that the ship is to you, but it's the aspect that you are off the ship's actual main line of direction. So, so they were great and they were useful, but they weren't the be-all and end-all that they were in the original game. And, as you began jiggling around, you began coming up with your custom ships that were just, joys of your heart. These are mine. Take what you're damn well given, and that's it. So, it's a perfectly adequate game, and it's supported by a range of miniatures. But if you wanted anything to do with original Interceptor, this isn't it. It doesn't use the same setting at all. It has no links to that at all. The factions in this have nothing to do with, the Terran Overlord government or any of that. There's no continuity in ship designs. There's one ship which looks vaguely like one from the original game, which is this one, the twin boom one, because the TOG had some great fighters that had that design. So that is the one kind of tip of the hat to the original game. But the rest is, it's got nothing to do with it. There are no contiguous systems with the original game at all, and it doesn't follow the same setting, period. Interceptor comes, you can get a campaign supplement for it. Yes, I got everything because I loved original Interceptor. This is actually rather good. So this is a campaign guideline system for Interceptor. And you could kind of borrow this to use for other games as well. What it does is it allows you to set up like a squadron, and it's not just, yes, it is a tool for playing games. Obviously it's all about generating scenarios for doing space fighting, pew pew, but it also kind of brings in the logistics of running a squadron. So squadron's not just a bunch of pilots, it's also, you know, obviously it's repair guys and maintenance guys and logistics guys and all this sort of thing. So it brings in rules first off for making your squadron, what vehicles you've got, what the pilots and pilot skills are. You start off with like 12 vehicles, 12 pilots. You know, every aircraft has a pilot. You've got a set amount of sort of repair, and you've got like a repair crew ability. You have a reputation for how the squadron is. As the game progresses, when your groups take damage and so on, you have to use your repair crews to repair them, to bring craft up to serviceability. You get injured pilots. You can rotate pilots out of the squadron. You can try and recruit new ones in. You can try and get spare pilots in because you might have injured pilots. You can take damage as part of the damage system in dogfights. So you might end up having to start jostling personnel. You might end up with pilots that are too injured to go up and fly, so now you can't field all your aircraft because you haven't got enough bums to put in seats. Your reputation can be used to kind of put the screws in to get better logistics and to get improvements on aircrafts and so on. So if you're doing well in the scenarios, your reputation is going up, which means commanders listening to you more sympathetically when you phone them up and just say, you know, for God's sake, send me more spares. You have a little way of figuring out what scenarios you get, what your home base is. You could be on a carrier, you could be down on the ground. These have different perks depending on what they might be. Your squadron has morale, which comes off how well it's doing in combat, and successors, and this affects all those morale rolls that you get in combat. So you can screw up your own morale by doing badly. Yeah, it's got pretty simple flowcharts for figuring out how to do everything. It leads you in. I mean, it's good and it's simple and it's clear. It gives you good selections of different types of missions that you'll be on, your combat patrols and cap, and send out on strike missions and all these sorts of things. And then it's got generations for all the different op forces. You can play it kind of solo. You don't have to have two different people playing squadron directly against squadron. There you can be generating NPC squadrons for each other to fight as well. There are campaign guides in here. So here's an overall campaign for carriers that are operating against each other, and as you get wins, carriers are being pushed out of areas, and you know, so you can win the overall campaigns. So you've got a built-in one here, plus you've got guidelines for making your own. They've got lots and lots and lots of different info on different potential star systems and so on, which give you any bonuses on them, like what hazards are in the area, what sort of bases that you can get. So you know, you can generate your different kind of very simple campaign jump maps and so on. So this is not a bad buy. For if you want a campaign system, which you could pretty much apply to any set of sort of spacey fighter rules, this isn't a bad idea. With this tied into Interceptor, the new Interceptor, yeah, you know, you've got a good game. You truly do. It works. You can run a squadron. You can put 12 aircraft out there, and you can play them in this system, and you can dive in and roll, and some of them will be damaged, and you know, pilots will get wounds, and pilots will build up experience, and so some planes will just blow up. You'll fire off missiles, which you know You've then got to replace because the ordnance officers aren't listening to you because your reputation's so low. You keep firing these things for no effect, so they're not giving you any more. Missiles in the game are a thing, definitely. You have to roll for lock, so you do have a frontal cone for lock, and then the turn after you fire them, you roll to see if they hit. And instead of, if there are different sorts, some of them have shields on them, which due to shields can sort of interpenetrate shields. So in them, if you can have a shielded missile, which the only way of shaking it is with maneuver, so you've got to try and get it out of your rear arc preferably, and then make a dodge roll. Or if it's an unshielded missile, which are cheaper, you can try and let it bounce off your own shields. If someone's firing missiles, suddenly people get less interested in lining up on people with guns, and they start throwing their asses all around the board to try and get those missile attacks at a disadvantage. Once everyone's moved, the missiles then that are due to move that turn, they just make the straightest move to the target. So obviously you want to be front on and at an angle, so it at least is rolling 2 less dice to hit you as you then make your roll to dodge the thing. So, missiles, simple enough. It's a perfectly adequate game, but it hasn't floored me the way the original one is. If you wanted a Starship fighter combat sort of game, it's good. It's perfectly great. But there are actually a great number of these sorts of games out. This one doesn't wildly stand out. Like I say, I try to find the good things in every game. Mr. Snoots tries to keep me honest though, so it's perfectly fine. But there are many space fighter games, many of which have kind of quirky fun rules and whatever, so you might want to shop around. You don't have to buy this. And if you're buying this because you're a fan of the original Interceptor from FASA, don't. It's got nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. So anyway, that's that one. Going to look at Leviathan next week. Anyway, bye!